The Stranger Things 5 trailer's just dropped and it looks amazing. 3 months ago we got the first look trailer, which was really awesome and started to set the scene of what was going to be happening, whilst also getting a whole lot of traction. On YouTube alone it got 25 million views, which is damn good for a teaser trailer of all things. However, that being said, whilst it did show off a few things, at the same time, it didn't clue us in on the major plot points. Pretty much par for the course for a teaser, but of course, I'm pretty keen to see more by this point. Thus, we come to this trailer, which only just released. So before we go any further, let's just jump into the trailer and see what we can find. We have a tiny little blurb to start off which reads, "With Hawkins under lockdown, Al in hiding and danger lurking at every turn, the entire party unites with a single goal, to hunt and kill Vecna." Interesting. Seems that we're going to be getting a much more proactive party this time around. Often they're reacting to something that happens to them each season, but here, it seems to be something rather different. It would actually be cool and fresh to see them make the first strike, and then it turns out it was part of his plan, and he's lured them into a trap. But yes, the trailer. We start off the trailer with a brief look at Vecna in the Upside Down. We hear his voice say, "At long last we can begin." So I guess he's probably had to take some time to recover since he got his ass handed to him by Nancy and the gang. What I found really interesting here was that there seems to be a Demogorgon in the room with him when he enters. And to me, it almost looks like it bows to him as if he's some royal and this thing's a servant or a slave that's paying deference. This is something I do wonder about sometimes. How much intelligence do these things actually have? After all, usually they're treated like hive mind animals. But then there was that Demodog that Dustin briefly raised and fed with 3 Musketeers bars. That one sort of broke free briefly. They're all linked to the Mind Flayer who seems to control them, and apparently the Mind Flayer is also the source of Vecna's powers, but they're different beings according to the wiki. According to that, the Mind Flayer is from Dimension X, which is where Henry got banished to when he became Vecna, and then the Upside Down sort of some midpoint connected to both Earth and this alternate place. I don't know, it's all very confusing, and I suppose we might learn more about it this season. Either way, Vecna and the Mind Flayer are treated as separate and yet interconnected beings, and for all we know, the show's never going to delve any deeper than that. In that case, that's what the extended materials are probably for. This scene in turn also had me questioning that blurb. Vecna says at long last we can begin, but to me that suggests he's ready and he's going on the attack trying to achieve his goals. I do wonder what the order of events is even going to be. Who Wants to Live Forever by Queen starts playing and just fits the whole vibe of everything so well. We get a look at Vecna's creepy grin chance, and honestly, I do wonder how the hell he ended up like this. I know that he got roasted by the lightning in that dimension where he found the Mind Flayer after he got banished by Eleven during their fight, but still, the dude has elongated bones and nails and everything, whilst also having extreme physical endurance as we saw when he took all that punishment in Stranger Things 4. How is that possible? Did he fuse with a Demogorgon or something using his powers to augment those physical abilities? Do we reckon that this is even something they're going to explain, or nah? Honestly, the more I think about it, the more it sort of feels like it doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things, and I'm just being a bit pedantic. He got changed by the alternate dimension is probably the only real explanation you need. After this, we see Dustin cycling into school on his bike and then walking through the school halls. I gotta say that this dude who he bumps looks very clearly too old to be a high school student at this point. I always find it so funny when they get very obvious adults to play the parts of teenagers. It almost never looks good, and it's especially obvious when it's a man. We have an aerial shot of Hawkins to show that it's still pretty smashed up. We see Mike and Eleven talking on the roof of the radio station, and then we see a military checkpoint. We have a bit of dialogue from Mike here. He says, "We're really starting to lose it, being stuck in here." He has more dialogue after this, but we'll focus on this for the time being. When we were first seeing the teaser, I kind of thought there'd be some sort of military presence and an exclusion zone around the new gate, but here it's almost as if 1, they already have that, but then also 2, they've also locked down the entire Hawkins area, which means nobody's allowed to leave. And I do wonder why that would be. Is it simply because they want everything contained because they don't understand what's going on with the gate? Or is it because they know that Eleven's in Hawkins somewhere and they don't want her to potentially escape somewhere else, hence the military lockdown of the region? Either way, I'm curious as to how they'd spin this for the outside world. Would they say there's been some sort of exposure to dangerous chemicals, which means nobody can leave? I'm actually rather intrigued to see how this plays out. I have to say, it's also nice to actually see some Al and Mike content too. I don't know, I just feel like too often they end up getting separated by the story. From the get-go, their dynamic was one of the core parts of the show way back in Stranger Things 1, and so I'm eager to keep that going. He goes on to say that perhaps tonight will be their big break. Alongside this, we see some clips of Joyce and Eleven in an underground tunnel, and I wonder what this means. Are these the old Demodog tunnels? Do those still exist? Is this them heading off on a mission of some sort, or is this maybe their way of getting Eleven to travel around to different places without being spotted by the military? On top of that, we see they have a hidden room at what seems to be the radio station, where they all meet up for their plans and whatnot. We see that both Hopper and Al are going to make their way into the Upside Down, I'm guessing either searching for whoever's going to be taken in that vanishing episode, or simply hunting for Vecna to try to kill him. I wonder if it's going to be revealed that they've been making a lot of different expeditions into the Upside Down across the year time skip, or if it's going to just be over the course of the season itself. Mike is still narrating across all of this, by the way. We see the majority of the group meeting up in the basement, and it seems like the trailer's trying to get you to think that this is Mike and the gang planning their battle against Vecna, but I kind of think it's not. His voice didn't seem in sync with the shot, and both Hopper and Al aren't there, and I think they kind of would be there for that discussion, given they're probably the two most important members of the team when it comes to combat. Hopper has the most experience, and I would assume the most skill with a gun, and Al has powers. Case closed. We see Al standing in the Upside Down looking at red lightning strikes before running towards them and leaping into what seems to be some sort of military base. Hold on. So was that second running part actually in the Upside Down, or was it just nighttime? If it's just nighttime in Hawkins, then I guess maybe she's breaking in to try to get to the Upside Down. As for if it is inside the Upside Down, then I'm not really all that sure, to tell you the truth. It would mean the military has to have a base inside the portal, which feels a bit insane, and so I think perhaps it's two different scenes spliced together in this instance. Back over at the radio station, we see Joyce sitting by the table looking extremely worried. Mike's sort of lurking in the background here looking pretty stressed. Are they going to have a conversation? Have they ever had a one-on-one scene where they actually speak to one another? Wonder what the context is here. Are they waiting for Hopper and Al to come back from doing something? That could make sense. I know Will ends up getting got by Vecna at the end of the trailer, but I don't think she'd be handling quite so well if that was the case for this scene. The trailer moves on to the OG party seemingly planning their next move, with Will staring off at something. We have Al telling Mike that this is one of his campaigns where he can control everything and write the ending for it. The reality is that this is serious business, and something could go wrong. This was probably my first indication that maybe somebody in the core group might actually bite the dust. I've always felt like the writers have never really had any interest in properly killing off one of the leads. They always introduce a character who's built to die. There's of course Barb, Bob, Alexei, and then most recently there was Eddie. I feel that surely they're not going to bother with the same sort of thing again, because who would care at this point? If it's the absolute final season, nobody wants to be wasting time with fresh characters you're just going to kill off. It's too late for that now, and so you have to hone in on what you know. Thus, I think there might be a chance they want to maintain that feeling of having a key death in the storyline, and so somebody might find themselves on the chopping block real soon. Then it's over to Nancy and Jonathan, who are watching as one of the portal things seemingly opens in the sky above them. We see that shot of the smog in the power line tower thingy, and Robin and Murray watching as portals open up on the ground nearby where they're standing. So is this Vecna trying to bring about the apocalypse? Trying to merge the two worlds? Nancy rants in what seems to be a hospital that Vecna's out to destroy their world, and he's not going to stop until they're drained of every last ounce of suffering. It then cuts to a shot we saw in the trailer of her crying in what seems to be a hospital bathroom based on the soap dispensers with bloody hands. Okay, so what happened here? This is surely after the vanishing, right? After that part where Karen and Holly are hiding in the bathtub under the water? Does she come home and find her parents dead or badly injured and she has to rush them to hospital? It does feel like they need to up the stakes quite a lot, and this could be a good way to do so. Plus, it does seem like Vecna has a particular disdain for Nancy and would surely hate her guts for the events of last season. Maybe this is him getting some early revenge on her before his plot well and truly kicks off? Something to cause her grief? Speaking of which, we have a shot of Steve hugging Dustin, who's breaking down. I do wonder what the context of this is going to be. I mean, earlier it did seem that Dustin got the Steve experience and that his face was all busted up in one of the shots. I suspect in the early days of this season, he's going to go out of his way to stick up for Eddie's memory, and this is sometimes going to make him a target for people to beat up on. I don't know though why he'd be crying and hugging Steve like this. Steve's even looking all shaken up. Maybe Steve had a near miss and Dustin freaked out at almost losing somebody he's close to again? Maybe Dustin's just breaking down because his life's been so massively traumatic in the last couple of years. It's probably one of those two answers. Eleven's running over rooftops, probably in the base she infiltrated in that earlier scene, and then there's that red lightning again. Yeah, I'm thinking the Upside Down is merging into the real world, just from this and the ground collapsing and that portal in the sky we saw before. It all just makes sense. She and Hopper are clearly going to go in alone, although how he gets in when she was using powers to do the big jumps over the fence, I don't know. We see 11 power up, and then this cuts to some huge energy wave blasting out from, is that the radio station building? I think it actually might be, to tell you the truth, so once again, it seems like a spliced scene that combines different sections of the story. Nancy and Jonathan are crying together, which also had me rather curious. What could have them both sort of sobbing like this? At the same time, it sort of seemed like they were smiling. Is this maybe a relief cry? I don't know, it's kind of hard for me to read their expressions. Lucas is in one of the tunnels being confronted by a Demogorgon. He has a bit of blood on him too, so he might be injured or was nearby when somebody got brutalized by one of these things. I do wonder how he's supposed to survive this. Is somebody going to swoop in to save him? After all, they are not going to spotlight any potential death scenes in a trailer. They want it to be a surprise, so he'll clearly survive this somehow. Then it's back over to Nancy, who's in the military base it seems, and is just killing random soldiers. Okay, so it seems like based on a lot of this trailer, at least early on, it's going to boil down to being Vecna and the Upside Down hive mind versus the soldiers versus the party. Hilariously, in that fight, it actually seems to be the military who's going to be the most outgunned, because Nancy is apparently capable of going full Rambo and killing soldiers as we saw here. And then there's Al. There are a couple of general reaction shots and then a shot of somebody falling through the sky through clouds near the red lightning. There's lots of floating rocks in the air too, so that's probably the upside down, and I'd expect it's probably 11 in the shot. For me, it's the only person that really makes much sense, and it also serves as a mirror to what happened to Vecna. The youngsters and Jonathan are having a big group hug. I presume it's Will that he's stroking on the head, but I can't really be sure. No idea what this is about, but Jonathan isn't looking too happy, so it's either a good luck type of hug, or somebody's died and they're mourning. My suspicions about key character deaths continue to intensify. Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve are driving through some random suburban backyards in a car with a satellite on the roof. I'm thinking this has got to be them hunting something, someone. Honestly, I know that at the start of the video I said that this trailer helped flesh out what we know of the plot a lot more, but apparently I was very much full of shit when I said that because I am so lost. There are some cool action shots with 11 in the upside down, maybe fighting Vecna. There's soldiers getting blown up. Luke is carrying Max out of hospital with a demidog charging the elevator they're in. Once again, context suggests that he's not going to be in much danger here. The doors are going to close just in time, or he'll dodge out of the way, get out of the elevator, and whilst the dog's stunned, it'll take a ride down to the ground floor or something. Holly and Karen are in the Wheeler house with the lights blinking, and they're all soaked. They've seemingly avoided getting kidnapped once in the bathroom, but now it's time for round 2. I think that one will get snatched, Holly, and then the other one, Karen, is going to get brutalized to lead to the hospital stuff with Nancy we saw earlier. Then we have a big action sequence and a big revelation. We see Mike, Joyce who's supporting a woozy Will, and then a bunch of kids trying to navigate a battle zone of Vecna's army fighting the actual army, and really just kicking their asses. Why is Will woozy at this point? Could the order of events be mixed up so Vecna gets him earlier? Because where is everybody else while Vecna has him, you know? You'd think his allies would care. So maybe Vecna attacks earlier on and does something to him and leaves him behind? They save him, more soldiers turn up and more monsters and the battle's on. But then there's also the fire to take account from the battle, which is all there when Vecna grabs Will. Damn, it's also confusing, I tell you what. I'm thinking that Will's gonna get powers from this experience. I don't know why, I just have a feeling. I do hope they don't go with him being mind controlled though. We've already been there in season 2 and it was great, but let's not retread old ground. Still, that ending with Vecna restraining Will using his powers and going to stroke his face was so freaky. Honestly, this trailer was so great. Great visuals, music, atmosphere. Plus, whilst the story still remains really hard to predict for me, at the same time, the crumbs we got were excellent. We are rapidly closing in on the release date for this final season, and the hype is well and truly reaching a fever pitch for me. After a pretty brutally long wait between season 4 and the upcoming season 5, I kind of figured my interest would have somewhat cooled off by this point. After all, that's what happened to me for a lot of other shows that have had multi-year waits between the seasons. They end up losing momentum and your interest fades. Not so much for Stranger Things though, although I guess I shouldn't be surprised by this at all, as the reality is that Stranger Things simply by the end of the first season had already become a cultural phenomenon, coasting off a really interesting story and a massive undercurrent of 80s pop culture revival, where it feels retro and exciting for those that never lived through that decade, and massively nostalgic for those that did. It's honestly probably one of the biggest TV shows of all time, and so of course it was going to be immune to the issues that surround a lot of other shows having these long gaps. I mean, like I said earlier, it already has a lot of momentum behind it. The official release for this trailer on YouTube has close to 6 million views, and has only been out for like 10 hours. I think based off these numbers, and the fact that the 4th season's the 3rd most watched English language show in Netflix history, whilst also being the finale of one of the biggest TV shows of the modern era, one that's come to define this era of premium TV by the big streaming services that's lasted close to a decade and thus built up a fairly huge fan base, it is clear that Stranger Things 5 is going to do absurd numbers. I really wouldn't be too surprised if it can knock off both Stranger Things 4 and Adolescence off the charts, although whether it can challenge Wednesday season 1, which is 100 million views clear of any rivals at all, is another story. I would say that if anything's going to do it, it will be Stranger Things 5 though. Finales just do big business. I cannot wait for this. Of course, once I reach the end of the first part and it sinks in and I have to wait again, I'll be cursing Netflix's name, but until then, I'm going to enjoy the ride. For me, this is probably the biggest TV finale since Game of Thrones, so let's hope they can really stick the landing. Of course though, with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the Stranger Things trailer? Did you like it? Hate it? Has it got you hyped for the final season? Maybe not? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.